Welcome, everyone. And those who are just joining us, please come and sit as close as possible to the front so we have some more interaction. My name's Lenore Cairncross, and I'm from IFC, the International Finance Corporation, and we're part of the World Bank Group. And this morning, we're having an Edge Discovery Workshop, a masterclass. So this is to introduce you to what Edge is, why it may be relevant, and also how you can get certification. So Edge is an innovation of the IFC. It was created to democratize green buildings. And this standard is available in 140 countries around the world, including here in South Africa. We also have presence across the continent. We have my colleague, Dennis Kwanzaa, who is our green building lead from Ghana. We also have GBCSA. We have Graham Cruikshanks, who's our representative from the Green Building Council South Africa. They are our local certifier here in South Africa for residential. And we also have Benjamin De Awera from SGS. They are one of our global certifiers, and they certify across the continent, including commercial buildings here in South Africa. So that's just to introduce you to my colleagues. So, what makes a building green? So maybe I can get a show of who in the audience is a developer. So, okay, quite a few. Who may be from a financial institution? Okay, a few of you. Anyone from any government organizations? Okay, yes, okay, great. Because these are all the parties that we work with in our Edge Green Building program. We work with developers, we work with financial institutions, we work with different levels of government, and we also work with the whole investment community, those who are also suppliers to buildings, whether they produce different types of supplies, where it may be air conditioning or bricks or other kinds of suppliers we also work with. So what makes a building green and why is that relevant? So we have the global, as everyone may know, the whole climate change agenda. And this is one of the key areas that IFC focuses on. We have some investment priorities that are specifically focused on climate. And green buildings are a significant part of that. So a green building would be a building that's more energy efficient, water efficient, and more efficient in terms of the building materials. Those are the three aspects that the Edge standard focuses on. So in terms of our standard, we would look at how you can have more efficient architectural design, you can have more efficient energy appliances or building techniques, and your building could comply to different standards such as Edge or LEED or Green Star in South Africa or BREEAM in other countries. And what makes the building green, because people can say, okay, I've got a green building, but how green is your building? So that's why we have certification standards to say the building is green because it complies to this particular standard. And for the Edge standard, it will tell you how much water you're saving, energy you're saving, and energy within the building materials. So it benefits the developer because you could show, you could save on your energy and water. And even though there may be an additional incremental cost of between 1% and 3%, you could recover this in less than 2 years. And that's what we've seen on developments here in South Africa, specifically in the affordable housing sector, where those costs have been recovered. On one project, the incremental cost was about 0.5%, and that could be recovered within 8 months of the project operation. Because often developers are like, yes, I have a budget, but why would I need to spend more on going green? The reason is, in the long term, it's going to provide more sustainability for your project and sustainability for the environment. So IFC has a 4-part strategy to support investment in green buildings. We work with the investment institutions and we provide advisory services for banks. So we work with the banks or the financial institutions to help them to create green financial products such as green mortgages. We can also work with financial institutions to issue green bonds, which we've done in a number of countries. There's also investment in the building sector. We work with developers and we've made investments in some developer funds, as well as directly to developers to help to create the market for green buildings. We've also done green building code work. And in this sense, in different countries around the world, we've been working in Ghana on the green building code. We also in discussions with the GIZ on assisting them with the energy efficiency code and how that could possibly be implemented in Nigeria on the implementation side, how the EDGE certification could assist with that. So the other part of our program is the actual EDGE certification, where we have IFC provides the standard, but then the certifiers are GBCSA and SGS. They provide the actual certification. So in terms of our investments, we've invested more than 4.5 billion in green buildings. And in sub-Saharan Africa, $419 million. And that's about 9% of the total investments in 130 projects. And then in terms of sub-Saharan Africa, there's a 16 trillion investment case or investment opportunity in sub-Saharan Africa. So for those investors who are looking at the sector. So just to give you an overview of EDGE, it's an application. We have an app that you can use in your design process to see how close you are to meeting the standard. So there are 3 criteria that we look at. That's the energy efficiency, water efficiency, and energy used within the building materials. So we use as the baseline whatever the local standard is for your building code in your country. So whereas some standards may be quite remote from where people are operating, EDGE has been localized to the local conditions, so the local climatic conditions, local building material conditions, and more. And it's an ongoing update to EDGE, so as things change and there are constant improvements happening. And we provide this third-party certification that's through our global certifiers. So that's the 20-20-20, 20% more efficient in terms of energy use, water use, and energy used in the building materials. So on that note, I'd like my colleague just to run you through how the EDGE app works and how it could be applied to a specific building case.
Lenore and I come from different families, as you can tell. That might be a little bit high. We were hoping to actually do a live demonstration of the app, but I think everybody's downloading the week's emails right now, and the Wi-Fi was a little slow. So what we're going to do is just run you through some slides which talk to exactly what you see when you log online in your own office at no cost to you, except for your data connection, to test your building against the EDGE standard. What you'll see when you do so is a screen that looks a little bit like what you see on behind me, and it's a very intuitive piece of software which allows users, whether you're a professional with deep experience in building technologies or an investor with only an investor view on buildings, to get a very quick view of how green your building is. So Lenore just mentioned a 20% improvement in energy, water, and building materials. The question I often get asked is against what? So how do you measure a 20% improvement for a new building? Because what are you improving against? You're improving against the building regulations for the country that you're working in. You're improving against typical building practice. And what this clever piece of software does is it models a base case. So by putting some pretty basic information into the app online, such as the size of the building, the GFA, the number of floors, the basic location information, so that the software knows that you're building in either a tropical climate or a Mediterranean climate or whatever the case might be, the software creates a notional building. It's a base case. It's an imaginary building against which you're going to be able to improve. And the software allows you to measure online in real time what you're doing to your project to make it better than usual. And as you can see, there are very simple color-coded graphs on the app. And they're coded to the different things that you would normally find in a building related to energy consumption and water consumption and building materials. So the purple at the top of the bar is the heating energy that a building might require. The blue color just below that, blue block below that, is the cooling energy that the building might require. And on the left is your base case, on the right is your improved case. And you literally tick a box, and as you do so, you may choose to install an efficient cooling system for the air in the building, for the HVAC plant. As you do so, you update the performance of the building online. And what you want to do is achieve a reduction in energy, water, and embodied energy in order to achieve your 20% improvement. And what the software also does, you see the bottom line there, is that it calculates your utilities cost savings. It's got a base case. The base case might say that for a home, a 3-bedroom home in a middle income category, which you've entered into the software, you would normally expect to spend 1,500 Rand a month on utilities. You've done some things to improve the performance of the building, and the software will then calculate your predicted utilities reduction. That's an extremely powerful case to make for doing things to a building to make it green, and to be able to communicate through marketing and building operation to occupants. So the 3 categories, as you do things to improve the building project that you're looking at, are all calculated online. So the energy consumption will be reduced, the water consumption will be reduced, and the embodied energy of materials. If anybody wants to know what embodied energy is, I'll chat to you afterwards at the edge stand. Those are all calculated in real time, and you can see the numbers, the blue numbers in the box at the top, actually list a performance improvement. In this case, it's showing an ambitious 30% improvement in energy, 42% in water, 33% in materials. The projects that have come to us so far in South Africa for certification, 5 projects have actually achieved certification. It's about 1,200 homes. They typically are getting just over the line in the energy category at around 22%, substantially better in water, often sort of in the high 20s, and in materials it varies dramatically because the different materials used in building construction allow a lot of opportunities for improvement. So the Edge software acknowledges that in some climates, air conditioning is quite commonly used in residential developments, India, for example. But in South Africa, that's not the case in residential developments. So what you're able to do is still improve the performance on the home and create a better indoor environment which doesn't need air conditioning and be rewarded for doing so. And what the software application does is it asks you at the beginning, as you enter your information, to determine whether or not you're going to have an air-conditioned or non-air-conditioned building. It then makes a decision about the base case that it builds for your building, and your improvements are then measured against the building with or without air conditioning, and that is reflected through the split in the bars that you see on the right here. So there is a case where there's no air conditioning, but you get a virtual improvement in the performance of the building. So you're not installing energy efficient air conditioning, you're installing insulation, which then reduces the need for air conditioning. So although you don't actually score points for reduced energy consumption, actually in reality, you're rewarded for doing things that future-proofs the building against ever needing air conditioning and creating a comfortable indoor environment. You don't have to appoint an expensive building modeling person to do all this stuff for you. The edge software does it all in the background. In doing so, it obviously makes certain assumptions that there are margins within which you can operate. So if you appointed an expensive building modeling expert who spends their days sitting behind a computer doing building modeling, they'll tell you exactly for your building, based on where it is, the adjacent buildings, the occupancy rates, what your likely performance is going to be. The edge software makes certain assumptions based on the fact that you've said you're building a 4-story office building, which is all consumed by open plan offices, or you're building a 2-story residential development with 3-bedroom units in it. It makes assumptions around the way it models those improvements, and the scores are demonstrated accordingly. So literally what you have in the edge software, and if any of you are interested in actually seeing a live demo, I think later on we might be able to log on and get a reliably updating web page. But what you see at the top of the screen will be these tabs here, which tell you which building type you're using. So it's either homes or hospitality or retail or office, etc. And then below that is this green bar with your results, which are very clear on the screen in front of me here, but slightly less so up there. And the results bar tells you live in real time how much carbon emissions, what your carbon emissions reduction is, what your utility bill reduction is, what your energy water savings are. And it even predicts what the CapEx cost differential is in building to the edge standard versus building standard. And those little blue boxes running down the left are what you tick. Next to each blue box is a description of the initiative that you're targeting. It might be external shading on the building. It might be heat pumps for the water heating system. As you click on one of those measures, you're able to find out more online about what that is. So if you're not familiar with external shading devices, you can click on that and it'll open a window which explains it to you. It says that the base case has no external shading. The suggested improved case has a shading factor of a certain amount and what you can do there. You can even click through to a comprehensive user guide, which is a PDF that you can download and keep on your desktop, which goes into a detailed description of what external shading is and how to make it work and so on. This is more relevant to the professional team that are actually getting involved in the nuts and bolts. More than likely, when clients are doing when they're doing self-assessments, they just quickly have a tick and see what their score is. There are calculators so that you can calculate your window-to-wall ratios or your thermal performance. But ultimately, what you want to do is get to this point where you're working in homes and your results are displayed up here, and your energy efficiency measures have all been ticked on the left, and your performance has been improved by 20% or more, in this case substantially more, so that you can then use that information to make the decision around whether or not you're going to certify and build green. You can save a copy of this thing and distribute a PDF to the rest of the project team to be used in, again, the investment case, or to inform the professional team around what it is that you're going to be doing. All of the different basic building data is captured on that. The measures targeted are captured on that. So that's just a very quick, high-level view of the way the actual app works. Lenore's going to carry on talking just now. Let me just lower this for you. We can have questions at this point, or we can carry on. The idea is that you do interact, which is why we encouraged you all to come to the front of the room. So, any questions around the way this thing works? Yes?
Just a quick question. Is there, on day one, some obvious things that you must consider? So you don't even bother going down the route?
Absolutely. So, with different building types, there are different focus areas. So commercial offices, HVAC and lighting are your key areas for energy consumption. Water consumption is not typically a big element of certainly of office buildings, although the HVAC plant can be a water consumer. So that's where you go. And you can have a look on the app at your options for improving the performance of your HVAC plant. You can go into that PDF and have a read through and see what the different options are that are available. We deliberately don't take a prescriptive view and say offices should all do this. It's deliberately set up so that you've got a framework within which you can work, depending on your project, depending on your location, depending on your budget, and so on. So the information is there for you to make that decision. But what we do also do is we offer training. So it's appropriate for just about anybody operating in the property sector to come on the training and understand a little bit more about green buildings as a basic concept, and then the application of the certification system to projects.
Thank you. I did try to go onto the website and just try and see how it all works out. I'm more interested on the residential use application, rather, of EDGE. And the question was, does it ask you to upload floor plans so that you can see orientation to north, so that you can, because I would assume that's what it would be requiring. But the next question is, what's your penetration into our public sector, more specifically human settlements? Because in building affordable housing, surely this is where you would want to apply EDGE to make sure that affordable housing remains affordable, even by way of energy consumption moving forward. Thanks.
Sure. So two very different questions. The certification process, that I don't have time to go into the kind of deeper detail on that, requires documentation to demonstrate that the project is in fact designed and built in a way which it meets the EDGE standard and which is legitimately green. So that requires the project documentation. So the orientation of the building, the size of the windows, the specifications, etc., related to the building envelope are all captured on the online system. You upload documents online, and the certifier then processes that information for assessment. On the affordable housing side, interestingly, the vast majority of projects currently registered for EDGE certification are in the affordable housing space. Affordable, not fully subsidized. So we haven't had any RDP or BNG developments come through for certification, largely due to the subsidy restrictions on that. But as soon as you step into the gap housing space, that's where we've seen the majority of interest. And what's very encouraging is that some social housing developments have been EDGE certified. There's a project in the Cape Flats, Bellhall Gardens, where some innovations around resource efficiency, energy and water efficiency were introduced. The project was able to target EDGE certification. It was linked to a global green climate financing fund, and I can chat to you a bit more about how that was leveraged. But it's very encouraging to see so many projects from the affordable housing space coming through the EDGE certification.
So on that, we have actually spoken to Department of Human Settlements, specifically in the Western Cape, and we did run some of their BNG standard designs through our software, and we found that they're actually not that far. So there would just be some small tweaks that would need to be processed in terms of the design in order to meet the standard. And if you would like it, we would be happy to have a conversation how we can take that further, because definitely the more we can have houses that are built to this green standard, and with these energy and water efficiencies, the more we can roll that out to a much broader section of the population. And I think that's part of the reason why we have the EDGE program and the EDGE software, as well as the EDGE standard, is to make it green buildings accessible at that sort of price point. Yeah. Thank you.
There are a couple of other questions.
Thank you very much. I actually want to build on this answer that was just given. My question is, because this was dealing with the building-specific criteria, is there a tool that's being developed by EDGE, maybe similar to the LEED neighborhood development tool, that deals with the precinct scale energy measurements?
At the moment, we don't have something on that sort of precinct scale, and I know that is what there is quite a lot of interest on that in terms of like having like a community kind of thing where you have a school, you have the houses, you have all sorts of, maybe some retail, all certified. And I think that's something that we are looking at. As I said, we're constantly updating the actual software and the standard, and that is something that is under discussion. Thanks.
Just to add to that, the Green Building Council and SGS work with a range of different certification systems. At the Green Building Council, Sustainable Urban Precincts is available for projects to tackle precinct-level interventions for sustainable development.
Graham, I've got 3 questions. The one is, which sectors does EDGE cover? Because I believe that you did, I think you first looked at residential and you started moving to other sectors, so which sectors? What is the geographical spread in Africa now, bearing in mind that you base it off the national building regulations of different countries? And maybe Lenore can answer that. And the third thing is, one of the big challenges whenever I've traveled into Africa and looked at various developments, people always, despite whichever development I'm looking at, people always talk about the housing problem, that people need housing. And often it's quite difficult to get an affordable housing, something that is affordable in that economy. So what has resulted is that alternative building technologies are often the route to go, to try and find some clever way of building houses at a reasonable cost, but not using traditional technologies. So how does EDGE deal with the multitude of alternative building technologies that are out there?
I'm happy to respond to your first and third question. The Green Building Council initially partnered with IFC to introduce EDGE for residential buildings only, because we felt that's where the strongest market demand was and where the best alignment of the rating tool with building typologies was. Subsequent to that, IFC, through their global partnership with SGS, have agreed to introduce EDGE for the full spectrum of building types, and that will be through SGS. So you guys may want to talk about that a little bit. Just quickly on your third question, the materials section of the EDGE app has a comprehensive list from straw bale construction to light steel frame to earth block construction to traditional brickwork, whether they be cement blocks or clay bricks. And it is able to calculate the embodied energy impact of each of those. What that does is it stimulates the debate around whether or not to use different building technologies. The EDGE app is not designed to encourage particular building technologies. It's designed to reward building technologies which have a lower environmental impact. But by doing so, it profiles those alternative.
So you think it covers most of the different permutations?
I'll be surprised if you don't find the one that you're thinking of on that list. It's pretty comprehensive. Yeah.
And just to add to that, we had our first student accommodation certification, which was built from lightweight steel frame, which is the Stag African project that's in Stellenbosch. And that's an example of alternative building technologies.
Okay. And in terms of geographical cover?
Want to cover that? Okay. Hello. Okay. So as for SGS, we are for the Africa continent. We are actually covering the entire region, and we are actually certifying buildings for the moment in places as diverse as Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Namibia, Uganda, etc. We had even exotic requests from Djibouti or other places. So we are definitely covering the entire geographical scope of Africa. Not all the countries yet, because this is still quite a recent standard that has been put on the market by IFC. But the growth that we are observing in the region is quite phenomenal. Is very, very fast from where we started. In terms of the segments that we're covering, and that might be also interesting, I think the beauty of the EDGE tool is that it is really targeting most of the segments in the real estate sector, starting from the residential, the homes on one side. You can actually see them on the tabs there, the gray tabs on the screen there. The second one is hotels. Then you have retails, and retails actually encompasses quite a few sub-segments. So we'll have shopping malls, we have light warehouses, light industrial building, etc. Then we have I said already hotels. So we have also hospitals or healthcare. And we have also education, which is new. It's not yet on that platform. It has been added about 3-4 months ago. And we have offices, right? So with that spectrum, we cover pretty much all kinds of building that can be designed. And For every building type that you select, obviously the questions that will be asked on the platform will be selective, will be adapted to the type of building. Graham was telling that for an office sector, for example, you will ask, is it a partition office? Is it an open space office? Are there parking included or not? Is there a kitchen in the building? Those type of elements are important for an office building. If it's for a hotel, you will look at whether they are doing the laundry and if they have restoration also on site or not. This has a significant impact on their consumption of water and energy. So every type of building has specific questions that will be asked to reframe and to make sure that the base case model is as close as possible to what you're building. And then from there, you will be able actually to calculate your improved cases by selecting the various savings measure that you're putting in place. So the tool is actually extremely efficient for that, and the calculation that happens behind the tool is actually quite enormous. I mean, the tool has been improving and is going through continuous improvement to make sure that there are new opportunities, new capabilities added to the tool to make it as close as possible to the needs of the developers, the designers, the architects who will be using it in their daily decision process.
And then I would also want to come in on the material session. If you find that your material that you're using for your project is not on the edge up, we are always willing to have a look at it. We will take the information from you and do some analysis and then see how it can fit in there. So yes, we are really ready to adapt and to all the new changing technology that is coming up.
Hello. Yes. Does the software allow for the impact of vegetation, gardens, shade from trees, etc., on the buildings?
The landscaping aspect is not part of the software as for now, and by that I mean it includes the trees, etc. We are only looking at the shading that is actually provided by the building itself, so by overhangs over windows or the shape of the building, but not vegetation.
So just a comment on the extent to which the EDGE rating system assesses building projects. It's deliberately focused on three tightly confined and defined categories: the energy consumption of a building during its operation, the predicted water consumption of the building, and the embodied energy locked into the building. That is to set it apart from more complex and arduous certification systems, which require a lot more input and a lot more expense associated with that. And that's what makes it so appropriate for an emerging market environment. The landscaping elements nearly always come into some of the other certification systems, but I'm sure you can appreciate where this is coming from. It's the only rating tool of its type which deliberately does that and makes it so appropriate for continents like ours.
Yes, so first off, thank you for this presentation. I like the term democratization of sustainability. That's neat. So I come from a background of doing LEED for over 15 years, and I like this in terms of the simplicity. It makes it available to financiers and developers. I'm an architect by training, so I like the complex side of it, which is maybe somewhere in behind the scenes of this. But I also understand that LEED and sometimes Green Star tends to be a little bit out of reach of our clients. But one question, a comment, maybe a reaction that I've seen that has happened in this sustainability movement over the last 15 years is, as codes and materials get better, you tend to find that attaining that 20% or a certain benchmark off a baseline becomes a lot difficult. There's a system we use in the US called Energy Star, where we started off at 50% better than code, and it almost became unattainable. So that's something, just as a comment, I don't know if you've started to think about a reaction to those types of good consequences, I guess.
So happy to respond to that. So the rating tools around the world are never static. and EDGE is part of that. You don't see the versions listed on this image on the screen, but every time you open the app, the version that you're working off is listed there. It's already on version 2.1. That shows you how many updates have been made in the short space of time that it's been available. The question often comes as well, if I register a project under version 2, but it takes me 2 years to build it, and you're now on version 3, by the time I finish, what happens to my project? The project is assessed under the version under which the project was registered at the time of completion of registration. So that's how we've addressed that.
Yeah, and just to say that I think globally the reason why the standards keep changing is because we are targeting climate mitigation, climate resilience, and more. And a lot of the discussions or the thinking behind these standards is how can we reduce our carbon impact globally. So we need to keep improving. And in fact, we've had some feedback from some architects to say, this standard is too easy to reach. You need to increase it and make it more stringent, because otherwise we're not really changing the way we do business or the way we build. So that's our aim. And in terms of IFC's investments, we have a target of 28% of our investments by 2020 need to be climate related, and by 2030, 35%. So from the investment side, we are also stepping up our emphasis on climate.
Let me just bounce on that answer also on the percentages. I think what's interesting is that I'll step back a bit just to talk about the certification. The certification happens in 2 steps, right? Because this is the essence of the tool is that we want to be able to give a tool which is a decision assistance for the designers. So there will be a first assessment done at the design stage or looking at the design of your document. So you get a first preliminary certificate after all the documents have been validated and it has been proved that you can actually meet the 20% target on all 3 parameters. And so this certificate will be provided by the certifiers, be it GBCSA for the residential market in South Africa, or be it SGS or other global partners for the rest of the market. Now, there is obviously a second step in the certification which happens post-construction or just prior, in the last few weeks just before the grand opening, to make sure that, there will be changes in the construction. We all know that these things happen in the process, and we will do a certification as built to make sure that regardless of the changes that happened, you are still meeting the 20% threshold for all parameters. Now, the certificates that you will be receiving at this final stage will be issued mentioning the percentage that you've reached. So on both certificates, on the preliminary and the final certificate, the percentage of savings you are actually achieving is mentioned. So that means the standards, it's not just about meeting the 20% threshold. If you meet 55, good for you, it's written on your certificate, and you can actually go to either your investing partners or you can go to your future tenants to say, you are going to save 55% on energy. This is your electricity bill right there. You're going to save 43% on water. And this is a key, it's a selling point for your tenants, it's a selling point for your funding partners also, to show that you're reducing the OPEX of the building in the long run. So this is something that's, I think, a differentiator in comparison to the other standards which are on the market. Yeah, we see a certificate on the screen there. So you see the values which are indicated in bold characters right there.
Okay, my question is relating to, I can see that obviously there's going to be all this enhancement, they're going to somehow improve the value of the property. I just wanted to know, to what extent have you inbuilt that into EDGE concerning the valuation profession, the awareness in doing that? Because if I come and have to value a building that has been certified and the other one has not been certified, surely there has to be a difference there. So to what extent have you taken on board the valuation profession? And even the estate agents, actually. on this?
Lenore and I spend a lot of time talking to investors, funders, banks, development finance entities, retail finance entities around this exact question. What we have found historically in South Africa is that the value that is attached to a green building is market-driven and not driven by policy, and not driven necessarily by the certification systems that are available. To give you an example, in the commercial property sector in South Africa, we have got 5 years of accurate data on the listed property funds in South Africa that hold commercial premium grade office buildings. The research there has shown between 1.5 and 2.5 improvement in total return on investment. Now, when you're looking at return on investment between 10 and 15%, 1.5 to 2.5% improvement is significant. Our historical data has proven that green certified buildings offer that difference in return on investment. There were panelists here from MSCI talking about that exact type of research information just yesterday. So that's the one thing. The other thing we do is we constantly speak to the financial services sector about integrating actual metrics for the valuation of properties. I think Lenore wants to show perhaps or a couple of slides or say something about that as well.
I just wanted to give you a better idea of what you receive in terms of the certificate and then how that could contribute to return on investment. Maybe not to the way the value the property is valued within the market, but as an investor, what kind of value that would bring to your investment. So, so the certification process, if you register a project, your project receives a project study that will then be featured on our EDGE website, and you'll see some of the projects there from South Africa and other parts of the world. This is the certification process. You'd register a project. It would then receive design certification. And once it's been constructed, it would receive post-construction certification. So there's 2 places where you can receive a certificate. What we found helps developers is once you've designed to the EDGE standard, you can then market your project as having reached the EDGE standard. So in some markets that could add some value in terms of how it's perceived by the public and that it will be a more efficient building, because it will be saving energy and water. And what we found on some of the projects in South Africa is that that saving could be quite significant for the tenant or the person who buys the property. There's been a saving of about 1 month's rental on properties that had rentals between 5,500 and 6,000 Rand per month. So that means over a 12-year period, you're saving 5,500 or 6,000 Rand a month, which is quite significant, especially in the affordable housing market. So in terms of the certification, what is the cost? Because that's obviously what we'd be looking at. This is Green Building Councils. They have a sliding scale fee. And what they do is you would need to retain an auditor to audit your project, and they would provide the certification. So there's a list of certified auditors that work with GBCSA. You would then retain that auditor and pay a professional fee and then certify your project. And there are also discounts for GBCSA members if you want to join. So you'll find all of this is on our EDGE website. Then in terms of our global certifiers, we have GBCI, which is the US Green Building Council, and they also use independent auditors, so you'd need to retain an auditor, and then you would pay them a certification fee. And we have SGS here. They offer an all-in pricing, which includes the auditing and certification fee. So sometimes some clients don't like to go and find their own auditor. With SGS, it's all happening under one roof, so you can, especially clients who have like portfolios, like to take that approach. So all of the EDGE certification process is managed through an EDGE dashboard, so it's all online. And because people were asking about uploading plans and so on, so that will all happen through the dashboard. And you can get a quote as well from your certifier once you register your project. There are also edge experts that can help you through this process. So for those professionals in the construction sector, you can register for one of our edge expert trainings. It's a one-day training, and after that you write an exam and you can become an edge expert. Then you can advise clients on how they can register their projects and take them through the process. So you're holding the hand of the client, because sometimes developers may not want to be going through that process. The other thing is they could have someone in their professional team who goes to them become an edge expert, and then that could expedite the process as well for the certifiers. I think the certifiers really appreciate when there's an edge expert on board, because it means the quality of the submission is that much better and the process can move faster. So in terms of the ROI, this is some research that was done specifically for South Africa in terms of what the incremental cost would be across those different building types and what the payback period would be. So for homes, this was like on an average home housing project. The incremental cost was about 570 Rand per unit, and then the payback period was in 6 months. And then you'll see, say for instance, in the light industry, the additional cost was about 650,000 Rand, and the payback period about 1.2 years. So you'll see the variation across different building types, and this is just for a typical building. What this generally shows is that the payback period is around 2 years or less for most building types, and the incremental cost is not that huge. What we've seen is it's in a range of between 1 and 3% of the building cost. And there will be more on this research for across Africa that will be presented a little bit later today as well. So this was just the research methodology where we took the case studies from. And this is just to show you what would be a typical case. So in this case, it was low-income housing. The average unit area was 80 square meters, 2-bedroom unit, about 10 floors or 50 units. Although most of the time we don't have 10 floors, we'd probably have like a maybe three-story walk-up. And you'll see there, as I mentioned, the incremental cost was around 570 Rand, and utility savings per month of 90 Rand. But as I mentioned earlier, we've seen on actual projects that the saving could be like up to 1 month's rental. And there is the village, which is one of the projects that has been certified. And you'll see the energy savings was around 25%. You'll see also the types of measures that it wasn't anything very different from a lot of what developers are doing. It's reduced window-to-wall ratio, natural ventilation, energy-efficient heat pump for hot water, and energy-efficient light savings and lighting controls for the common areas. And then water savings was at 24% with low-flow plumbing fixtures and dual-flush toilets. On materials, they used solid dense concrete blocks for internal and external, and achieved a 54% saving on the embodied energy in the materials. Yeah, there's more. And these various case studies, I think people will receive the slides so they can go through those. If there are any further questions, we can take more of those.
Thank you. Just a question on Edge for as-built. Does it exist, or is it for new developments? Yeah.
No, it does. It's actually a possibility. There is a possibility to go straight to the final certification as built for existing building. And this is also applicable to larger portfolio approach. So we can consider a portfolio of, say, 10 different office towers or a housing project which is already in existence. And obviously it is a much faster process because we can go straight to the final elements.
Thank you. And then the other question was also linked to Mr. Sue's previous question. Does the tool have a GIS capability which has a built-in intelligence if you just give it your address, and then it can determine the prevailing conditions, vegetation, water table, climate, things like that. So if I put in my address and it shows that it's in Johannesburg, then it knows immediately what's the climate in Johannesburg and blah, 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 all of that, versus if I'm sitting in the US or in Asia.
So the first thing you type in when you start logging the information on your project on the design page will be the actual country and,
Sure.
and city location of the project. The country will have a direct influence on your cost savings, because if you are in South Africa, the energy cost will be based on how much it costs to have 1 kilowatt hour in South Africa. Your water cost will be based on the local cost here, right? So all your cost savings will be calculated based on the going rate in the country here.
Okay.
That's for the country. When it comes to the city, this will have a direct impact on the climatic data which is used, but we're talking about climate essentially in terms of precipitation and in terms of insulation. Just to calculate how much sun gets on your window, how much it will heat up the building, how cold it gets in the winter or in the cooler season of the year in terms of the heating needs, etc. And the water is for rainwater harvesting solutions, for example. So it will not look at aspects such as water table or these type or vegetation, etc., as it does not have a direct impact on the building, at least not in the base case. As Graham said earlier, this is really focusing on these three elements of energy, water, and materials, and the vegetation aspect has been left aside for that matter.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, apart from the cost advantage, it seems a lot cheaper than other tools. What are the main advantages of Edge over BREEAM, LEED, Energy Star, Green Star? I mean, the main thing to me seems to be that it's simple to use and it's more cost effective. Are there any other advantages?
Professional fees associated with those other rating tools are significantly higher because of the inputs required, and that's one of the fundamental differences regarding the comparison of the different rating tools. Plus the global application of it, and the global recognition. IFC is a powerful brand, and as a result, Edge carries the same status wherever you're working, and it eliminates that, well, is it the same as LEED, is it the same as BREEAM or Green Star or whatever the case might be, debate.
Hi. As a construction professional, I mean, we all understand the challenges we face in terms of costing and green building. We do understand that green buildings are important. I've just been through your presentation and you saying that, okay, there is an early return, but the challenges we face, and I would like to have your thoughts on it, is that in some instances, the developer is going to sell the property. So he's not very interested in how do you say, in implementing cost savings, additional cost, which will bring savings to the buyer in the end. So that's the challenge we face, and what are your thoughts on it? I would like to have your thoughts on it.
The first and easy thought is that you can actually find a tenant much faster if you can demonstrate savings in their OPEX. And this has been observed in various places. If you can demonstrate, and this is what it does here, if you can demonstrate that the electricity cost, the water cost would be reduced in the long run, you can reduce the time it takes to find a tenant two or three times. This has been demonstrated in seven green buildings. There are some market research in US, in UK, in other countries, and we believe that trend is actually starting to also materialize in emerging economies.
Okay, so does the Edge software do that for you?
The
No.
Edge software provides demonstrates what are the savings in energy
Okay.
and water, and
Okay.
so
You have
for
to-
that matter, you know exactly how much the tenants are going to save.
Okay, thank you.
I think your question also is, how do you create the demand? And so the Edge software, as Ben rightly says, gives you the information that you need to build the business case. But you need a receptive audience to the business case, I think, as part of your question. And to do that, the IFC, the Green Building Council, the other certifiers there are two channels to that. the edge expert that was mentioned earlier by Lenore is a person who's qualified to transfer that information to whoever they're talking to do the advocacy work to help stimulate the demand. It helps the edge expert because they're part of a service, and it improves their value proposition to clients. And also the organizations that are responsible for the conception of the rating tool, the implementation, the certification, do actually do marketing and advocacy work to create awareness. And we have specific campaigns linked to that.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask about the certificates themselves. So you monitor the project, you say this is the cost savings if you do this with water, energy, and materials. So my question is, is there any room for error? Have you had people who've gotten the cert before, and then afterwards they've assessed it themselves, they've done the numbers, and they thought, hey, hold on, it actually hasn't met it? Is that at all possible?
Yeah. You might be, are you talking about the stage between design of a building and actual construction, or are you talking about post-construction?
I'm talking about both, actually.
Okay. So sometimes what happens between design and construction is elements of a building are taken away, a building project. So maybe the specification changes regarding the building facade or the building services or something like that. And in those cases, there's some juggling required to try and make sure that the project still complies with the certification system. So far, we haven't had any projects fail there. One of the reasons is that the basic 20% can be achieved without going too far out of typical practice. That's because EDGE is set up deliberately to allow projects to make some improvement to their resource efficiencies and still meet the standard. But if you want to go to 60%, obviously you're going to have to do a whole lot more. As Ben just said to me, what we're finding is that projects are in fact frequently performing better than the results shown on the EDGE tool after completion. So that's the second version of the question that you asked for. And their results are often better. And that's sometimes linked to the way that the buildings are operated. The building owner knows they've got an EDGE certification. They're conscientious, they've chosen it. Therefore, they're measuring themselves against that to see if they're getting return on investment. And quite frequently, they're so conscientious that they're doing better than their 24, 27, 32% that's displayed on the certificate.
Thank you.
Instances where you're doing post-occupancy evaluation, like year 2, year 3 into the cycle of use, and do you have any of that data?
We've been running EDGE for just under 3 years in South Africa, but the data is being collected.
No, thank you.
We've got shopping centers. These are all part of the ROI case study. And then in terms of green building finance, we've, through financial institutions, IFC has invested about 600 million. I think some of the questions are if developers are very concerned about, financing the projects, then what may be available to them. So IFC invests directly in developers or through financial intermediaries such as housing funds or private equity funds that have funded developers and commercial banks to stimulate this green building market. And what we offer in terms of investment support, we can do debt, equity, or structured finance investments in developers who adopt the green standards. And we've done bridge loans, warehousing facilities, long-term loans. We've also done green bonds. And this, in fact, IFC has invested in a fund for green bonds called Amundi, which is a $2 billion fund. And so far, about $750 million has been raised. So this is another way that we can stimulate the green financing that would then benefit from green projects. One thing is that if one has an EDGE certified project, then it automatically qualifies for climate bond initiative certified bonds, so a green bond. So sometimes the challenge for green bonds is to ensure that the projects are actually green. And EDGE takes you along that route by simplifying the documentation needed for that process. In terms of advisory, we have a green mortgage toolkit, we have the certification tool, and because it shows what the incremental cost is, you can see what that return on investment would be as well. And through our global awareness campaign for green buildings, we're also working with green building councils globally, and also with government relations and how there could be incentives to stimulate the green market. So in terms of having a green building is seen as a market differentiator, and while it may not have as much value now, I think as the way that the world is moving in terms of the increased awareness around climate, more and more those, the value of the building is likely to appreciate. And we've seen that in the markets in the Northern Hemisphere as well. For green customers, they're saving on their utility bills because of their energy and water savings, and also lower maintenance costs because more sustainable materials are used. And there's also positive behavior, especially in some of the homes where they've installed smart meters. They found that because people were observing their energy and water usage, then they automatically tend to use less. That's an interesting observation on that. And then some companies are needing to report on their carbon footprint. So having an EDGE certificate actually then would calculate what your greenhouse gas savings would be for that particular building. And more buildings are now going to be looking at reporting on the energy efficiency of the building as well. So that can help with that. This is for green bonds. EDGE has been approved by the Climate Bonds Initiative, and also that it makes it much easier to report on that. And then there's a little bit on government incentives, different ways that governments can support green buildings. And we've worked in different parts of the world with governments on how some of these measures can be implemented, and they don't necessarily need to be monetary-based incentives. They can be non-monetary incentives as well. So what does EDGE offer you? There's a financial calculator, and I think we're one of the few apps that actually has a financial calculator in it. There's a simplified compliance because it's just the 3 parameters. Streamlined eligibility because we're a global provider of the EDGE certification. Reduced processing costs. And of course, more cost effective as well. So we've had our Q&A, and unless there are any further questions? Well, thank you, and just to, do you have a question? Yes, go ahead.
Where you can start certifying the scale of development. Say, for instance, I'm from Botswana. If I have a multi-residential of 5 units, can I certify that?
Yes, as long as I think one home, well, it needs to be 2. But one, you can even certify 1.
Oh.
Yes. Single build. So that's definitely possible. Just to mention that my colleague Dennis Kwanzaa is based in Ghana, and he's also covering Nigeria and Kenya. And our program, we have bases in Ghana and in South Africa, but more and more we're trying to cover the continent. So if you have any projects in any other areas, we'd be happy to assist with the help of our certifiers. So thank you to Graham Cruikshanks from GBCSA, and Benjamin from SGS, and my colleague Dennis Kwanzaa from Ghana, from our Ghana program. Thank you, everyone. And if you haven't already put your name on the list, please do. And we'll be happy to be in touch. If you have any projects that you'd like us to run through to see if it works with our program, then we'd be happy to assist you with that. Thank you.